Now, right now, as I'm doing this video, the new stock price is up 1%, which is something that is interesting, especially though seeing that most of the stocks are on the red. I mean, today we saw, or a couple of hours ago rather, we saw President Xi and President Trump meeting in Korea. And this is something that was very interesting to see the two leaders finally meeting, right? It was some positive vibes, positive sentiment there, which I was expecting, I think, the markets to do even much better than how they are performing, especially on our very own NEO, because NEO, if you remember very well, Chinese equities like NEO, they were impacted heavily on the tariffs when Trump announced, or President Trump announced that he would be imposing the tariffs. When President Trump started with the tariff game, right, imposing tariffs onto China together with other countries all over the world, the markets did not like this. We saw quite a number of stocks tanking, including U.S stocks. I mean, in as much as obviously we've been seeing back and forth, both countries need each other, right, in a certain way or in some sort of, to a certain point, to a certain extent, which is why it's important that the two countries are in peace and there's no fighting, because when the two strongest countries fight, guess what happens to the other countries? We all the other countries catches the flu, right? These are the countries that are having the strongest economy. So this is what is happening, and it looks like market wise we are seeing NEO, our very own, at least on a green today. All the indices, or all the major indices in the US, S&P 500, the Dow and the Nasdaq, they are all on a red, and together with other stocks, or most of the stocks, which shows that the market has not really picked up anything solid from or did not pick anything that is that positive from the two reactions between the two presidents, right? But our very own NEO, like I said, as I'm doing this video, they are up 1%, which obviously is not that good because we're expecting more. I think I was expecting more in the markets, but we are not going to get that. Now, one thing that obviously we know happening in China is that China continues to be the country that is growing. In as much as the US also, it is growing tech-wise, AI and all that, China is also a country that is also growing. I mean, China's economy is heavily focused on manufacturing and exports, with recent industrial growth driven by sectors like EV and green energy, whilst the US has got a stronger service-based economy, higher GDP per capita, and leads innovation-driven industries like aerospace and semiconductors. China is big in manufacturing and exports, whilst on the other hand, US is big when it comes to innovation, semiconductors, chips. We all know that China, to a certain point, they still rely, or there are still so many companies in China that are still relying on US chips. Our very own NEO, at some point in time, before they developed their in-house chip, they were using, of course, NVIDIA chips. NVIDIA is a US-based company, and this shows you how far the US is when it comes to chip making. But, of course, something to be noted, especially with our very own NEO, is that they've gotten to a point where they've developed their own chip or semiconductor, especially for autonomous driving, right, to try to curb the restrictions that sometimes come from the US. I mean, there are so many times where we saw the US, or United States of America, even still both under Trump administration and during the Biden administration, we saw how they can sometimes restrict the chips to be shipped into the US. Under the Biden administrations, I remember well, there was a point in time where Biden administration restricted the H100 chips. Trump administration, I remember recently they were restricting the H20 chips. This was to try to, of course, punish China or slow down the technology in China. But we know again that China has tried to make or fight or hedge against that by encouraging their local companies to create their own chips, which is why today we are sitting with companies like Huawei, companies like NEO that have started developing or that are developing some of their own chips. I mean, Huawei, it is apparently so far to a stage where the Chinese government is recommending or recommends that, look, the local companies must try to go and source chips from local companies like Huawei, because they know that Huawei, it is also investing big on chips or semiconductors. But I must say, US is still very powerful onto chips. Don't get it twisted. Yes, in as much as we are seeing China growing or China developing in terms of chips, US, it's still a very strong company. It's still a very strong country with chips. I mean, companies like Nvidia, companies like AMD, companies like Intel. These are some of the biggest chips company that the US has, and these companies are still innovating and growing their chip business, and it will take some time for China to catch up really to the kind of point where US is at when it comes to chips and technology, right? But China, however, you must note that there are certain industries that even with US having some strong innovation, having some strong chip production, industries like EV in China, there is no place globally where you can find smart EVs than in China. Smart EVs, or the most smartest cars, this generation, are being built in China. When you talk about technology, when you talk about AI in cars, you cannot talk about that without talking about the cars in China. I mean, I remember one of the, in fact, US leader, Ms. von der Leyen, was talking about or encouraging the local car producers, I think in Germany, to say that they must innovate, they must really invest on R&D so that at least they can also tap or get to autonomous driving. He was encouraging the local companies, and he said countries like China and the US, they've got this thing right. It looks like things are going well when it comes to the development of autonomous driving, and they encourage local companies to also push or prioritize that, which is something that shows you how far China is when it comes to autonomous driving, right? But anyways, I don't want to make this video too long, man. The reason for this video was just to tell you that, look, it is good that we are seeing the presidents or the two presidents meeting of the strongest economy in the world, and this is supposed to be good news to our very own New stock, because though they did not talk that much about trade and all that, the markets, at least to see that the two presidents were sitting at the same table or on a round table, it was just so great. And I think, yeah, maybe we should have been getting a rewards from the market from that, but hopefully we get to see more meetings like this, or more sitting like that between the US and China, because at the end of the day, if the two countries or strongest economic countries are not in peace, are fighting, then it's going to be bad, right? And on either side, and it's going to also hurt our stocks like NEO, which is something that obviously we don't want to see. But anyways, don't want to make this video too long. Like, share, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. That is all from me, and God bless you all.